Hello Econ classes, here's a quick lesson on the law of demand, and we will review this in class with some activities. But the first thing I'd like you to do is to take 10 minutes and read an article called iPencil that is on the website. College econ professors were asked to name an article that they thought was most important for high school econ students to be familiar with, and this one won large support, majority. So iPencil, I did mention it the other day in class after the test. You will find that it is hilarious. It's super well done. It's the story of how a pencil is made from the first person perspective. I mean, it's just an attention grabber. You just won't be able to put it down. And we can discuss some of these questions in class. Basically, how many people does it take to make a pencil? Why do all the people cooperate? Who organizes all the people? You can probably see where this is going. But I would like you to read it. I do think it's important. We'll discuss that on Wednesday. But getting on to demand. The law of demand, the joke goes that if you teach a parrot how to say supply and demand, you have basically created an economist, because economists boil everything down to supply and demand. If we were in class, I would typically ask for everyone to bid on how much you'd pay for an A on unit 1. Okay? You have to be willing and able. You could say $1 million, but if you don't have $1 million, you're not willing and able. So that's what I mean when I put this down here. And basically what we would then do, when we set up our demand graph, we always put price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. We put our highest price, let's just say that it's $50, and I have one bid. We'd plot a point there. And then at $40, I had one bid. And I would ask you, so how many, oh, that doesn't look right, how many A's would I sell at $40? And the correct answer is 2. Some people might have been lulled into saying 1, but the reason it's 2 is that the person who would have paid $50 is happy to keep an extra 10 and only pay 40. And let's say at $30 I had a bid for an A. We'd plot that point here, and we would derive the fact that if I were to sell A's on unit 1 to people that are willing and able, I would have a downward sloping demand curve. And then I would ask what that means for the relationship, and you all would astutely say that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity for the law of demand. That's exactly what this says, and you guys would have derived it all on your own. Ceteris paribus, which is a really important phrase, Latin that means all else equal, because the world is a complex place with lots of moving parts, and we'd say let's freeze everything and say all else equal, ceteris paribus, there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity for consumers. And the wording here is going to be really important. You're going to get tired of me saying this. But notice what I wrote here. If the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases. Well, if the price of the good decreases, the quantity demanded increases. It does not say demand increases or demand decreases, because those would be shifts, as I'm going to make clear in a second. So what gives this negative slope? Why does it look like this? Why does it look like this? Well, economists will give a few different reasons, right? And these are movements along the demand curve. There's P and Q. And then if you lower the price to P1, you'll sell Q1 units of output. If you raise the price from P1 to P, you will decrease the quantity demanded from Q1 to Q. So what's the big deal? The first reason, and we did talk about this, I meant to have the highlighter, we talked about this with pizza when I drew this in class, that there's diminishing margin of utility, that each item gives you less satisfaction. So to get you to buy more of something, I'd have to lower the price. If I left the price the same at P, you would only buy Q quantity. If I lower the price then to P1, you may buy an additional unit of output because it's worth less to you, but it would still be a good trade if I lower the price. So that's one reason it has a negative slope. The second reason it has a negative slope, there's two ways to have more income. One is to have more money, and that's obvious, but the second is to have the price go down. And the income effect basically says that if you lowered the price from P to P1, the reason the quantity demanded would go from Q to Q1 is that people's incomes have effectively increased. I mean, if you go into SA with $1 and you were expecting to buy a pop, and lo and behold, pop is only 50 cents, what just happened to your dollar? It can buy twice as much as you expected, and that's called the income effect. And so economists would say as the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases because your income effectively increases. And the third reason is called the substitution effect. The substitution effect simply says this. Let's imagine that this is the market for apples. And by that I mean like Honeycrisp or Sweet Tango, not the computers. As I lower the price on apples from P to P1, the quantity demanded we would expect to go from Q to Q1 because people are now substituting to apples and away from things like oranges or bananas. Because oranges and bananas now got relatively more expensive when the price of apples decreases. So people buy more apples because they substitute over to them. In the other direction, let's imagine the price of apples increased. We would expect the quantity demanded to decrease because what just happened to oranges and bananas? They got relatively less expensive when apples went up in price. So all of these are reasons that the demand curve has a negative slope, this inverse relationship, and you should know these reasons. The diminishing margin of utility that we experience, the income effect, and the substitution effect. Okay, this is crucial. Let's set up two demand curves. Probably be nice to have a stylus instead of my finger, but this is how it is. Okay, so let's just change color here as well. Maybe make this a little clearer. A shift versus a movement. Okay, we'll do shifts over here on the right. We had said ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus. And that if you raise or lower the price, the quantity demanded would change. Well, with a shift, you say, let's get rid of this, and something might change that causes the whole demand curve to shift to the right, and that's an increase. Or something might happen that causes the whole demand curve to shift to the left, and that's a decrease. Okay, that's getting rid of ceteris paribus, and I'm going to talk through the shifters in a second. But over here, a movement, this is still ceteris paribus. This we'll call a change in quantity demanded. As you lowered the price from P to P1, the quantity demanded increased from Q to Q1. But over here, the shift was just a change in demand. When you change demand, the whole curve shifts. Over here, all you did was change price. And that resulted in a change in quantity demanded because of the law of demand. So we will consistently in this class refer to the changes in price as a movement and the changes in demand or the change in supply as shifts. Movements, change in quantity demanded, change in quantity supplied. Shifts, change in supply, change in demand. So naturally you'd ask, what are the things that are going to shift the demand curve? Here are the shifters, and I lined them up so that they spell the word inept. Income. If everyone's income in the nation were to increase, you would expect demand to shift to the right, to increase. And these are also called determinants. I'll probably use that. Determinants, if it fits. Oh no. Determinants. Okay. So shifters. If everybody's income were to decrease, demand would decrease. The whole line would shift. And I'll give examples of this in class. Population. If the population of Minnesota doubled, The population increases. You would expect the demand for something like Sweet Tango apples, the demand would increase. But if the population were to decrease, you would expect the demand to decrease. Expectations about the future is a shifter. Let's imagine you think gas is going to be more expensive tomorrow, then your demand would increase today. If you expected the price to be cheaper tomorrow, your demand would decrease today. And that's a shifter. You're not changing the price, it's expectations of a future price. Maybe you can put that, expectations of future price can shift the price today. Prices of other goods, substitutes and complements, that's a tricky one that I'm going to show you more in a second. But tastes and preferences, fads. If something's really cool, everybody wants it, demand is going to go up regardless of price. Right? It's really cool. If something's not cool, like clear Pepsi, demand drops and they stop supplying the same quantity. Well, let's do a little bit more on substitutes and complements. So here's what substitutes and complements would look like. Let's set up two goods. Let's do peanut butter and jelly. Price, quantity, price, quantity, demand, inverse relationship. Okay. What is going to happen if, maybe that's not a good pen to use, you lower the price on peanut butter from P to P1 and the quantity increases, right? This was a change in quantity demanded. Peanut butter got more expensive, you sold more peanut butter. But what does that do over to the market for jelly? When peanut butter got less expensive, you sold more, which is going to increase the demand for jelly. But did the price of jelly change? It did not. This is a shift. This over here was a movement, right? We could go in the other direction, maybe try another color. This is getting a little messy. Say you raise the price on peanut butter, the quantity demanded would decrease because peanut butter is more expensive, and the demand for jelly would decrease. Did you change the price of jelly? No. So these are what are called by economists complements. You use them together, right? And this is how a lot in the world works. What they'll do is lower the price. Imagine over here that you have printers, and they lower the price on printers, and that increases the demand over here for ink. Those ink cartridges get really expensive because the printers are really cheap. So we'll do more with that. Substitutes. Let's just do butter and margarine. You can see where this is going. Price, quantity, demand, price, quantity, demand. Okay, butter. You lower the price of butter. Price, P1, Q, Q1. You change the price on butter, you will sell more butter. The quantity demanded increases. And what happens to the demand for margarine when butter got less expensive? It decreased because everybody bought butter. They substitute towards the cheaper good. Now, did the price of margarine change? No. Let's go in the other direction. Let's say that the price of butter increased from P to P1. The quantity demanded will go from Q to Q1. You'd have a movement along the curve from here to here. And what is going to happen to the demand for margarine? It will increase. So the rule, there's an alliteration here. If the price of butter increases, the demand for margarine will increase. Substitutes go in the same direction. When this is more expensive, people want this. When butter's less expensive, people will not demand this. Two more things, quickly. Normal and inferior goods. This has to do with income. You could do something like ham and spam. The assumption is that a normal good is something that when you have more income, you buy more of it. and an inferior good is when you have more income, you buy less of it. So let's imagine that incomes increase, and you buy more ham, and you buy less Spam. So the income shifter is a little more complex than I led you to believe. What you then realize is, let's imagine that your income went down. Now your demand for Spam would increase to D2 because you have less income, and Spam, or for ham, it would decrease because this is a normal good. So economists will literally measure consumption patterns and say, are people buying more of it when they have more income? If so, it's normal. Are people buying less of it when they have more income? It's inferior. And the last thing, I do want to say this, because economists recognize the limitations in their models. There are things called Giffen goods. And a Giffen good is something where even if the price increases, like Izzy points out, the price of bread, you may buy more of it. Let's read what he says. As Mr. Giffen has pointed out, a rise in the price of bread makes so large a drain on the resources of poor laboring families and raises so much the marginal utility of money to them that they're forced to curtail their consumption of meat, and the more expensive farinaceous foods, and all bread being still the cheapest food, which they can get and will take, they consume more of it, not less. What he essentially said is there are rare times when the price could go up and the quantity demanded would go up. That seems to go against the law of demand. But what it means is it's still the cheapest food, right? It's still the best option. It's just that everything's getting more expensive. So, 16 and a half minutes, we're almost at 17 minutes. This should give us a great grounding to practice and do a lot with whiteboards on supply. I'm sorry, not supply, demand. We'll see you Wednesday.